Always good to see the pads on here as we welcome you to a special edition of Cards Cover 2 from State Farm Stadium, our continuing coverage of Cards Camp 2019. And that's right, on this Sunday afternoon, the Cardinals practicing in pads. As we say hello and welcome, alongside Mike Jurecki, I'm Craig Grialou. Not too many more of these practices left. Only 2 more open practices here for training camp. That would be Monday and then next Saturday. Of course, in between, the Cardinals will host the Raiders on Thursday. But always a little bit of a different energy, different excitement when the pads are on. And, we haven't seen this team in pads since that preseason opener against the Chargers. Yeah,
and coaches maintain that, yes, they're going to evaluate guys what they do in the preseason, but because of so much film they have in practice and when you're in pads, usually guys stick out. So it's interesting the way they're going to obviously look at this roster and grade guys. And obviously you want to flash in preseason games, but you also want to flash in practice because they got more film on you. And in this case, when you're in pads, you want to show up that day.
That's why it's not always great to make too big of a deal or draw too much of a conclusion as far as what a team or player does during preseason, specifically that preseason opener against the Chargers, because don't forget, there's been a series of practices since, and the Cardinals doing an evaluation all the way through until they have to make those final cuts ahead of Week 1 when the Lions come to town.
Well, and also, though, some guys play a little bit different when the lights are on, and
Absolutely.
I think they're expecting that from their backup tackles. And obviously those guys, they're looking for that third swing guy, and we thought on paper they had a couple guys on the roster. So, a lot of times when the light's on, that's when you're going to have to perform. So it's a catch-22. It's not only what you do in the preseason, but also what you do in practice.
I'm glad you brought up the offensive line, and let's start this show with that. And specifically, you're talking about Reese Odhiambo and Corey Cunningham. They were running with the first team yesterday because Marcus Gilbert and DJ Humphries had veteran days off, but you're looking at 2 young players. In the case of Cunningham, a second-year player, a 7th-round draft pick a year ago. He was pressed into duty as a first-year player. But knock on wood, nothing happens to Humphries and Gilbert, that they are able to go the entire season. Their history suggests otherwise, so you have to have a plan in place. And they did not perform well on Thursday, talking about Odhiambo and Cunningham, and they've had their struggles and their high points in practice. But according to Kingsbury, quote, "I like what Reese and Corey have done so far as progressing, but when the lights are on now, they have to step up and prove they can do it week in and week out." And that's exactly, MJ, what you were just talking about.
Yeah, and Kliff also said there's a lot of teams, like 31 other teams, that are looking for that swing tackle. And they're not easy to find. And we know that kids from college are playing in a spread offense. They don't even get into a 3-point stance. DJ Humphries, a former first-round pick, he sat for an entire year. Maybe it was the immaturity coming out at 20 years old. And hopefully he's learned a lot of that because he knows that this is going to be a big year for him. So it's interesting just how teams are desperate for that swing tackle. And maybe that guy is not on the roster right now. I got to think Corey Cunningham is the guy that they'll keep just because of his upside. Of course, Humphries is a free agent, but maybe that guy's not here right now. Maybe a veteran's out there, and they just want to see what they have in the next couple of weeks before they make any move.
Well, they do have one open roster spot, and perhaps it's with that in mind, trying to figure out who might be available and who a team might release, whether it's because of performance or just because they make too much money. But typically, when you get down there towards the end of, preseason and training camp, if you are getting released, there's a reason. It's hard to find someone, it may be in the case of, again, if it's a salary cap move, then perhaps you can get someone who's certainly got a resume, got some experience.
Well, I also think if you got a young guy that has more upside, and it does come to finances, sometimes teams will let a guy go maybe even earlier, but that player wants to show those preseason games. So at the end of the day, they're all being evaluated, and that's why you say you got to get some stuff on tape. So for the most part, again, they're going to search the wire, but maybe that open roster spot is for, maybe a position that you have a certain injury for, and you're just kind of waiting to see. But I agree with you. At some point, they're going to have to fill that roster spot.
Team is finished with its stretching portion of practice, now breaking up into position groups, position drills, and it looks like maybe a little one-on-one drills practicing on the tackling, something that Kingsbury had brought up as far as making sure you right technique. Of course, you're not tackling to the ground, but what you're seeing now between ball carrier and defender, just part of that practice, and then hopefully that translates into work during the game.
Yeah, it's all about technique. It's about wrapping up. You hopefully have 3 or 4 guys swarming to the ball. Obviously, you lead with your shoulder. Your head goes to one side of the body, and so that's what they're working on. And again, even though they're in full pads, they don't want to see anybody on the ground.
And then typically in a game, it's not just one guy, but a series, as you want all 11 hats to the football once you get into game mode. But and that's when we talk about tackling and mistackling and the physicality, that's something that every team is dealing with right now because you don't practice it on a daily basis once you start training camp.
There's no doubt, and they always talk about from off-season workouts to preseason, a game gets a little bit faster, and then we get to week 1, it's going to be even faster. You get to the postseason, it gets ramped up even more. So you got to make sure you protect your team, but at the same time, the CBA rules don't allow you to hit every single day. Matter of fact, when training camp starts, you got to wait for that 3rd day, and you got to pick your spots now that you're playing preseason games.
As the offense now breaks up into wide receivers and quarterbacks along with the running backs, we can let you know that the Cardinals did make a couple of roster moves earlier today, and one adding a tight end. It's actually someone that was already on the roster, but Charles Clay has been activated from the physically unable to perform list. He had been bothered by a knee injury, but good to see him in uniform on the practice field because here's someone that was added real early in the offseason and someone that Kingsbury knew from his time in college and believes could have a serious role offensively once we get to the regular season.
And this could have been the plan all along, that they knew that obviously, he was let go in Buffalo. They signed him before free agency started. And so maybe they thought, all right, this is how we're going to treat this rehab going into training camp. But obviously he's a guy that has experience. I mean, he didn't put up the numbers in Buffalo. They had a rookie quarterback, very different from a guy like Kyler Murray. Josh Allen has the arm strength, but obviously accuracy was an issue there. So on paper, he mentioned 4 different guys, and I'm curious to see, Craig, when we get to the regular season, even though they started the first preseason game out with 2 tight ends, and I don't know how much we're going to see of that, but I'm curious to see, when they go to that 3 wide, 1 tight, 1 back, how much is a tight end used in this offense? You look at Max Williams, that was a really good pickup considering where they are depth-wise. He's a guy that can block. He can go out and run routes. Charles Clay's very similar to that. I would say they're 1 and 1A. And then Ricky Seals-Jones, they're looking for matchups on the outside. And then Daniels has stepped up. Caleb Wilson was a draft pick. He may be a practice squad guy. So I'm curious to see. I think they're going to keep 3, but how do they use the tight ends on game day?
Yeah, that tight end position was a focal point of this morning's press conference with the head coach, and he believes that the tight end will, quote, have a pivotal role, unquote, in this offense. And you talked about a number of those guys. They all do something a little bit different. Max Williams was the one tight end that was on the field the entire opening drive against the Chargers, and he is someone that is certainly impressed and maybe taken advantage of his increased reps because Charles Clay has been on the sidelines. But you've got him, you've got Ricky Seals-Jones, who, once again, Kingsbury complimentary of even before this training camp began in the offseason because of his familiarity with what Seals-Jones did at A&M back in college. And then, of course, Darrell Daniels, who is fast, physical, maybe a little bit inexperienced, but someone that the Cardinals believe has a potential with a future. But as you said, how many tight ends do you keep? You can't keep them all. And just how many they keep might tell you just how much of a pivotal role they are in this offense.
Yeah, and I think the Cardinals were a little disappointed last year in Ricky Seals-Jones, and maybe it was the offense and the play calling and just, trying to get something, maybe a desperate situation out of a position. But I was impressed when he caught that ball in the game in traffic. Okay, and that's something last year he was dropping those balls. So the thought process was in the offseason for him to get stronger in the upper body, start working on the hands, because he can be a mismatch if you got a linebacker or safety on him. He's tall, he's got some speed on the outside. But again, he's a work in progress. But I was impressed that he did it in the game in traffic, caught a nice pass, and he was able to hold on to the football.
Tight ends heading off the field, maybe for a little extra work on the lower portion of the field as we scan over and see now the defense, which is working in white. 3 different defensive areas right now, and if you notice, the defensive lineman, Marcus Robertson, the cornerbacks coach, over with the D lineman. Linebackers coach Bill Davis watching the DBs. So what you're seeing, and we've seen this a couple of times during training camp, when the position coaches will go to different parts of the defense and then help maybe a second set of eyes, or hey, this is what we do as linebackers, we want the DBs to do this, or this is what we do as cornerbacks as far as tackling. Let's make sure the defensive linemen know what they're supposed to do. So it's all about the teaching, which a lot of these players have brought up, because they all have their specialty, but there's also something that can be learned collectively as a group with all the different guys that Vance Joseph has underneath him.
And you bring up the point of just the staff on defense. A lot of these guys have a lot of experience. And how do you cut your teeth? You become a position coach first, and then Billy Davis has been a coordinator 3 different opportunities: Eagles, Cardinals, 49ers. Marcus Robertson's been a coach and secondary coordinator, so to speak. So I like that. I've been covering the team 26 years now. I've never seen position coaches change personnel, or in this case, have different drills, not with the regular position coaches. So to me, like you said, it may be something Billy Davis or Marcus Robertson sees that maybe will help a guy when it comes to technique, because this is all about tackling. All these drills they're doing is about tackling, and you can see Marcus Robertson down there showing you, hey, you got to line up and tackle the guy, and that's how you bring him to the ground.
Coach Davis, Coach Akoff working with the defensive linemen. Then on the far corner of the end zone, the defensive backs going through drills, and there is a new number that fans need to know about, and that is number 26, Brandon Williams. Like Charles Clay, activated from the physically unable to perform list. He's been troubled by a back issue that limited him not only at the start of training camp, but much of the offseason. And for Williams, it's someone that the Cardinals and Cardinals fans are familiar with, former third-round draft pick, but someone that still has not been able to kind of really gain a footing outside of his ability on special teams, which is a good one. But this team believes that he can be an excellent cornerback. It's just a matter of making sure that once he gets his opportunity, he takes full advantage of it. But now all of a sudden, Brandon Williams gets thrown into the mix as far as that number 2 cornerback opposite Robert Alford, at least through the first 6 weeks of the regular season.
I feel like he, and rightfully so, just where he was drafted, him and Chad Williams, they've been maligned, and quite frankly, it's a production business. Brandon Williams, though, there's guys like Bill Bates and Steve Tasker, and I'm not comparing them, but they've cut their teeth on special teams, and he's been on this roster because of teams. But you and I were having a conversation today, and you're like, I want to see it first. I'm just telling you, he's a former running back, and he's one of the faster guys on the team. I know he's got to cover guys, and they feel like in man-to-man defense, maybe that will play up to his strengths. But if he ever gets a hand on a ball, I could see him taking it back, but he's got to put himself in coverage. But clearly he's a special teams player. But if you're going to make the roster, you provide depth at that position. So I know a lot of Cardinal fans are wondering, why is he still on the roster? Well, he provides something that 5 to 8 guys do on game day, and that's play on special teams. But they want to see something from him at the corner position if they're going to play man-to-man press coverage at the line of scrimmage.
He was able to maintain his roster spot last year because of his ability on special teams. I just don't know how much longer a team could afford someone strictly special teams outside of kicker, punter, long snapper. At this day and age, because roster spots at a premium, and certainly with this head coach and this coaching staff with an offense that wants a lot of pass catchers, there's going to be a certain position group that you're going to have to go less with because you want an extra wide receiver, or maybe you want an extra tight end or an extra running back. And just to have someone that can do special teams, but you're not quite sure can play defense or offense, those you mentioned the great special teams players. I think those days might be behind us.
Yeah, but let's just go back to last year. I mean, you look at Trent Sherfield. He didn't make the roster on being a wide receiver. He made it on special teams. Ezekiel Turner, he made the roster playing on teams. Now these guys are back. Dennis Gardeck didn't get a single snap. last year on defense. And now he's getting an opportunity filling in for Son Reddick. So I know what you're saying. And now the question becomes, do you keep 5 corners because they're going to get a roster exemption when Patrick Peterson goes on suspension? He won't count against the 53. Or do you keep 5 safeties? I think they'll keep 9 back there. Maybe they go 10. Like you said, it's always a numbers game. Do you keep an extra wide receiver? Do you keep an extra DB? Because likely those guys I'm talking about are going to play on special teams.
You are watching a special edition of Cards Cover 2 as we bring you coverage of Cards Camp 2019 here on this Sunday afternoon. The team working out in pads here at State Farm Stadium. Craig Grialou and Mike Jurecki as we go over some of the news of the day and recap what Kingsbury met with the media. His comments as the Cardinals now look for their second preseason game coming up on Thursday, a nationally televised game when the Raiders come to town this coming Thursday. The other roster move that we need to let you know about is the defensive line, which is now currently on the lower field, way tucked in the back corner with Coach Akoff. And with the news that Darius Philon was released late yesterday, that opened up a roster spot, and it was filled by Pisoni Tassini, number 96, a player that is very familiar with the Cardinals because, well, he's been on and off this roster I don't know how many times. Originally joined as an undrafted rookie free agent in 2017.
Okay.
Spent much of 2018 on the practice squad. Did get into one game, recorded 1 tackle. He was on this roster until May when he was released, and now here we are in August, and he is back. So I hope it didn't travel too far, but he has been and it's hard because it's like in Major League Baseball, there's guys that have minor league options. So sometimes you make that, up and down, up and down, up and down, and that's kind of what Tassini's been, that guy that you could always count on. But when you get into a numbers crunch, he's sometimes the odd man out.
I mean, he's got to be on speed dial by now. I mean, but the thing is, he's familiar with the defense, and he's got the body to play in the interior. Now, again, a lot of it has to happen. We'll see if he makes the roster, but let's be honest, they need bodies in camp. Now that Zach Allen is taking the spot of Philon, so all of a sudden you need another guy, and we think they're going to keep 7. So he's familiar with the defense. He'll stick his nose in there. He's never going to fill up the stat sheet, but he's a guy that's willing to go in there and mix it up, and that's what you're looking for from a guy that right now is trying to make the roster.
Well, as we talked about with the offensive tackle position as far as a number 3, dare I say a number 4, but just the depth at that position could very well be defensive line, whether it's an end or an inside guy with that extra roster spot that this team still has and can fill at a moment's notice. But right now, I would think offensive line, defensive line, if you're looking to not an upgrade, that's a different story. But just as far as depth purposes, because you have that extra roster spot, those might be 1A and 1B right now.
Yeah, you look at the transaction logs over the last 10 days or so. Teams are cutting and bringing in new players every day. Now, those guys seem like they're undrafted free agents. There are still some veterans out there that are waiting for the phone to ring. Like the Cardinals kick the tires on Michael Crabtree. I got to assume they have somebody in mind, and maybe these guys will get here after the second preseason game. So it's not just waiting for the waiver wire. There's some vets out there right now that are looking for jobs, but maybe the money isn't right, and then they start getting a little bit desperate, and they get what they call get off the couch money. But some of these guys that they're bringing in, I call them Jags, just another guy. But that's not a bad thing. It's meaning, you know what, in life, it's all you can ask for, an opportunity.
Absolutely. And then when you get that opportunity, what do you do with that opportunity? As we continue here, let's slide back over to by the 10-yard line. Grayson War, again, let's focus a little bit on the linebackers because we didn't get this on film. It happened after we had exited on a special edition of Cards Cover 2, but during 11-on-11, a little bit of not a scare, but Terrell Suggs accidentally knocked the ball out of Murray's hands and immediately raised up his arm saying, "My bad." It was down near the goal line. Murray out of the shotgun, as usual, throwing from his own end zone, and Suggs came in from the right and got there real fast, but maybe a little bit too fast, and instincts played a part, and all of a sudden the ball is on the ground, and everyone's wondering what happened. But, Suggs a little over-anxious. We saw that happen with Chandler Jones also earlier. It's hard to tell these guys when you're rushing the quarterback, don't hit the quarterback, but something Suggs knew immediately, and all was forgiven.
That's my quarterback.
Exactly. Suggs, by the way, Kingsbury very complimentary of this morning, and this is always interesting, but Suggs and Kingsbury, the same draft class, yet one is still playing and the other one is coaching that player.
And I think it's been known over the when he signed here, but it was reiterated again today that he wanted to come to Arizona. He basically said, we thought he was going to stay there, obviously maybe take a little bit of a haircut or pay cut, but he wanted to come here, and all of a sudden the Cardinals were thrilled that he wanted to come here. So obviously he's excited to come home, play in front of family, and I think he feels like he's got something left. It's a one-year deal. We'll see how he plays. As you mentioned, he played 72 snaps last year, but he's wearing the quarterbacks are wearing black jerseys. Don't touch the quarterbacks.
Here was Kingsbury's quote about Suggs' interest in the Cardinals as opposed to maybe the Cardinals' interest in Suggs. Quote, I don't think we had him on our radar, not thinking that we could get that done until we realized he really wanted to be out here in Arizona and be close to his family, unquote. So that's a player maybe sending out feelers that, look, I'm a free agent, I'm interested. How interested are you guys? And, of course, the Cardinals were. They had a need at outside linebacker, and when you're still producing even at an age as Suggs, why not bring back the hometown kid?
Well, it kind of synced up. They made a decision internally. They were going to let Marcus Golden test free agency. He signed with the Giants, obviously familiarity with James Betcher. Giants defense wasn't very good last year, so they bring in some former Cardinal players, and so it made sense that they allowed him to test free agency. He decided to join the Giants, and so it opened up a spot for them. So if Marcus Golden was healthy last year, maybe he was one of those guys they would have extended. But they felt like maybe they want to move in a different direction, or he wanted more money than they were offering. But the fact that you get Suggs to come in here on a 1 or 2 year deal, I don't care how old he is, he's still savvy. He's going to beat you with physicality and just technique that some of these young offensive linemen haven't seen.
Another update for you as far as players on the injury front, and this was nothing serious, but Budda Baker, who is now working in the end zone as the DBs, as Marcus Robertson, the defensive backs coach, goes through work with the safeties. But Baker appeared to hurt his foot about halfway through practice yesterday after, it wasn't during his interception, but he had a pick of Kyler Murray on a pass intended for Fitz. A little bit later on, noticed that Baker was now kind of on the sidelines, but just precautionary according to Kingsbury, and Baker is good to go, full go, and we see him in full uniform right now. So, one, good to see him on the field, and two, yesterday, good to see him with an interception because, as he's quick to remind everyone, he has no INTs in his career.
But he does have a touchdown.
Career. He does have a touchdown.
A scoop for a touchdown. Fumble scoop for a touchdown. Listen, this guy loves football. I know all these guys are paid to play football, but he's going to have to really be banged up to miss a practice. And you wish this with all 90 guys. Now each guy has a different injury when they're not practicing, so some are more severe than others. But this guy just loves football, and I'm glad he's okay because he's going to be a big part of what they want to do defensively.
Well, he was out yesterday, and DJ Swearinger, they're kind of watching his reps. Rudy Ford, Jalen Thompson, Deontay Thompson getting some first-team reps. So good to see for a couple of young guys as the Cardinals, again, trying to figure out what they have behind their starters, not just at safety, but all across the board.
Yeah, and I'm looking at Jalen Thompson, and I'm looking at Deontay Thompson, and I think they're a little bit different. Obviously, Deontay Thompson came from Alabama. He dropped to the 5th round because there were some rumors about a knee, and then he had wrist surgery, couldn't work out at the combine. And then the Cardinals in the supplemental draft, they used one of their 2 5th-round picks, maybe from the Dolphins, for the Rosen trade, and they get Jalen. So I'm curious to see how they're going to mix and match, because I think both guys have a future, and I have to bring this up. DJ Swearinger is on the final year of his contract. Now the Cardinals will have a lot of cap space, so you look at Jalen Thompson, 20 years old, 39 starts in his career. He would have been a second-round pick next year. So if they don't get a role as a starter, obviously provide depth, and they can also play on teams.
Meanwhile, on the other end of the field, the quarterbacks throwing to running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. DJ Foster, I see, is in uniform, working in full pads. He was not practicing yesterday as they continue, I think, to monitor his workload coming off an ACL injury. 1 day of practice, 1 day off, depending on just how much he's doing. But that's another player and a position group that keep an eye on as we continue on here through this preseason. But with regards to the quarterbacks and, of course, Kyler Murray, a lot of talk today about just his accuracy with the football. And there are some missed throws, but they're not, well over a receiver's head or underthrown. But the accuracy that he has shown all the way back from high school into college and now here at the professional level, something that Kingsbury was asked about and then detailed that basically from the time Murray was born and learned how to walk, his father worked with Murray as far as accuracy, arm angle, arm slot, arm strength, and it's just now all paying off as he not only the number 1 overall pick, but the only rookie quarterback this year that's expected to start week 1.
Yeah, I mean, according to Kingsbury, obviously, when you're talking about Texas football, I mean, they're getting $60,000 for a Friday night high school game, and we know how successful he was. He also mentioned that his father is one of the best quarterbacks coaches in the country, and a lot of people tap into him. And we've talked about, when he was 5 or 6 years old, he learned to throw a baseball and a football. Now, I went back and looked at his drive. He starts at the 3-yard line. He shows the arm strength to throw to the left side of the field and completes a pass. And then he throws to the right side. And obviously, if Johnson's in bounds, that's another good play. And then he rolls out and the screen pass to David Johnson. He knew that he had to take the sack. I mean, honestly, what else more we need to see until week 1? I mean, I know he's going to have to
just
play.
More of it. I mean, you get all so excited about what you see, and you just want to see more and more. And we all have to wait until the regular season. It seems.
But people nationally now are talking about it, and we've been talking about him for a while. But I'm just saying, there's something special about this guy. He's got the Mike Vick legs, and some of these throws, they're similar to Patrick Mahomes. I mean, that's what I'm talking about here. I know, pump the brakes, put down the Kool-Aid, but I am really jacked up to see what he can do. Now, clearly, he's a rookie. He's going to be growing pains. Obviously, it's going to come down to protection and weapons and everything else. That's part of football, blocking and tackling. But, man, he passes the eye test.
Kingsbury went on to say that it's become so consistent that at times when Murray doesn't throw a spiral, he asks Murray, "Are you good?" As in, are you okay? Because something's wrong, because the ball does not look like it does nearly every single time he drops back to pass. And we've seen just how tight the spiral it is, how quickly that ball is thrown off his hands and gets into the receiver's hands or chest. It's almost automatic to where you almost take it for granted at times when a pass is not quite perfect on the money.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those scenarios where it's just, I mean, I don't think people realize that this is a very unusual situation. And on the other side, it's unique because he's been in this offense since he's 15 years old. I mean, let's be honest. I'm sure imagine if the Cardinals didn't draft Murray and you watch that highlight, the first game, you're like, oh my God, they should have moved on from Rosen. I mean, I think they validate making the pick. I know it's only one preseason game, but we see it every day in practice. And again, I'm just excited to see this exciting offense. And I got news for you: we haven't seen nothing yet.
That's the kind of feeling that you kind of get from talking with people, because as much as we saw the tight ends on that first drive, do we really see that many tight end formations once the regular season begins? How much of the running backs, 2 running back situations? So, yeah, I think, you keep things close to the vest right now. And then, of course, when this team does break camp, which is 1 week from today, and heads back to Tempe, then you can kind of open up the playbook a little bit. But as we've heard Kingsbury say, it's all about our base offense because you're going to run that and then do variations off of what that base offense is.
Yeah, and you can still do the evaluation process. I mean, I don't know how much the starter's going to play. According to Kliff, they're going to play a little bit more than they did a week ago. But besides Murray, I want to see this entire rookie class, first year, second year guys that, obviously are on the bubble. They need the playing time in the preseason because we get to week one, it's a different animal.
Continuing coverage here of Cards Camp 2019, a special edition of Cards Cover 2 here at State Farm Stadium. Craig Grialou and Mike Jurecki as got a little wide receiver defensive back drill going on one side, and then a pass rush drill going on the other side of the 50-yard line. Defense working against some tight ends and running backs. So a good practice. Again, one of those padded practices, so you want to make sure you get as much work in as possible.
I like the way that Kliff came out, short throws, get him comfortable. Obviously, you don't want to start off on your 3-yard line, but you got to give the defense credit with Jordan Hicks getting that fumble. But just to get him in rhythm, because at some point, he's going to take some shots down the field, but he's not going to force it. But I like the fact that he got him in rhythm. He made some tight throws, and I think you can build off of that and get his confidence going.
Before we head on out of here on this Sunday afternoon, the entire NFL world was awoken to tragic news, and that is concerning one of the Cardinal family members. Former wide receivers coach Darryl Drake has passed away at the age of 62. He was currently working with the Pittsburgh Steelers in his second season as wide receivers coach. Died suddenly this morning. No other details, but certainly affecting the Cardinals. He spent 5 seasons with the Cardinals under Bruce Arians as the wide receivers coach, and one of those players down on that field right now, Larry Fitzgerald, certainly hit Fitz hard, and Fitz going to social media just right before practice and had a thread, and I'll just read it verbatim on what Fitz said of Coach Drake. I'm heartbroken for anyone who had the privilege to know Darryl as a man, a coach, a husband, and a father. He was as good as they come. I can't put into words the impact that Darryl had on me. He was my position coach for 5 years, and he's been one of the greatest mentors and friends in my life since we met. We'll get through this difficult time by focusing on all of the love that Darryl had for others and that we had for him. It's what he would want. Let faith guide us through all this incredibly difficult moment. Sending prayers to all of the extended Drake family, especially to his incredible wife, Sheila, and their beautiful children.
We had the opportunity to cover him. As you mentioned, he was here in 2013 to 2017. Then he worked for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I got a chance to talk to him at the Combine every year. And obviously he's wearing different colors, but he was always so helpful. He had time to chat. And then you just look at the timeline on Twitter today, just from Chicago. Obviously he's got an affiliation with Bruce Arians, now the Pittsburgh Steelers. Peanut Tillman tweeted something out. I mean, it's just, you could just see he took time to talk to people. Even Josh McCown said he was working out and he didn't really know how the workout was going to go. And he said Darryl kind of guided him. And this is Josh McCown, who went to a small school in Texas. So just you hear these stories, and he had time for everyone. So our thoughts and prayers go out to his family.
Absolutely, and a class move by Kliff Kingsbury opening up his press conference this morning, sending out his condolences to the Drake family. Admitted that he did not know Coach Drake, but had heard enough stories, and then brought up the fact that Coach Drake, 40 years coaching, not just on the professional level, but 40 years, and certainly had an impact on a lot of people's lives. So yes, as MJ said, we extend our thoughts and prayers to the Drake family as well here with the Arizona Cardinals. And with that, we'll sign off here on this special edition of Cards Cover 2. Cardinals back in action. Practice here at State Farm Stadium tomorrow. Go to azcardinals.com for the complete schedule. Reminder, not many of these open practices left, just Monday and then next Saturday before the team breaks camp, and then we'll do the rest of their work before the regular season from Tempe. Special thanks to those behind the scenes, Jim Omohundro, Grayson Choi. Until tomorrow, Cards Cover 2 from Cards Camp 2019. For my partner, Mike Jurecki, I'm Craig Grialou. We'll talk to you on Monday.